Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Vlog, 57.1, continuing from what I said I would do in Sleepy Vlog 57. So I said I would start or answer all of Ghostcritic's questions of the week from this past year. I really love his Questions of the Week show. I do want to add to, I was talking about creative pairings, like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee or Lennon and McCarthy. Um, I did want to add a few other things that I didn't think of saying before, which is one of the aspects of creative pairings that this author talked about was also that there often is a lot of disagreement about who did what amongst them and a lot of tension in their creative pairing, and they often break apart. Um, but I think we can all see all these pairs that just never did quite as good work without their partner as they did when they were paired up. And I was talking about Steve Root and Mike Barron, and I have no idea what their relationship is personally and why they haven't paired up permanently, but it's so clear to me that their creation together is the best thing the two of them have done that I'm aware of. I should add. Uh, and another aspect of creative pair, I said I kind of wondered about myself, the fluid or the container thing. I also just wondered, what if I had somewhere in my life run into the perfect creative partner for myself? Would I have achieved much more? Would all of my unfinished creative projects have gelled and come together? Who knows? I'll probably never get to test that out. Are these people who end up in the creative partnerships that really take off, like Lennon and McCarthy or whatever? Would they have taken off without finding that proper creative soulmate? Because we've seen so many of them. Lennon and McCarthy did pretty good without each other, but overall, when you look at all the kinds of things, we've seen a lot of creative pairs that once they split up, they never quite gel the way they once did. So you've got to wonder how many people out there just never found the right creative pair. Anyway, that was bobbling around in my head. And one of the cliches that is probably true frequently, especially in elder days, was that behind the famous author was a wife who did a lot of the work. And perhaps traditionally, if the creative pair is a man and a woman, the man gets the credit and the woman doesn't. But perhaps behind some famous creative women, there's a man who helped them along too, and was their container or their their director. Anyway, we will never really know what goes on behind the closed doors of the creative weddings, but for whatever reason, it's an interesting subject to me. So, Ghostcritc, one of my favorite people on the community. I mean, in terms of his videos, I've never met him in person, never had a personal hangout with him. But anyway, I greatly appreciate Ghostcritc, and one of his great ideas was this question of the week all year for 49 weeks. I see. He put out a video on Monday where he posed a comic book question to all of us and had people type the answers in the comments. And then after a while, he invited people to ask him questions, and his videos got longer and longer as he would ask a question of the week and then he would answer all the other questions. So I thought it would be fun to try and answer all his questions of the week. As I've been typing them all down slowly, the deeper I get into it, the more I realize, well, some of these questions to answer very well would take some time and thought, and I'm not putting time and thought in them. I'm just going to read them now and answer them the best I can and then move on to the next question. I think there's maybe 48 or 47 questions. There might have been one or two episodes that didn't really pose questions. But anyway, and the funny thing, the first video he did, he was just introducing the idea of the question of the week, and he threw out a ton of potential questions, like which member of the Avengers would you want to make eat kangaroo testicles? But some that caught my attention, he says, you have to buy a hairpiece for Professor X. What style would you choose? What color? I would like to see Professor X with one of those kind of 50s pompadours, maybe blonde, a blonde pompadour. I don't know why. The thought of him in a toupee, I want it to be as ridiculous as possible. If you had to give another, these were supposedly not questions he was actually asking the audience, but potential questions, which he never did end up asking. Since I went through starting with his most recent video and went back to the very first one, and now I'm starting from the very first question and moving back up through time, back towards where we are. So another one of these theoretical questions was, if you have to give up buying comics for a whole year, what would you do with the money? Now, assuming you couldn't save the money, which is what I really should be doing, right? We should all be saving money for our retirement or our kids' college. I would probably be buying more technology. So I'd have even more iPads and computers and things than I do if I didn't spend that money on comics. And then another theoretical question that he didn't really want the answer to is, what hero would you dress your other half as, if you had your druthers? In the back of my head, there's some like ridiculous outfit that one of the characters in Warlord was wearing that, really didn't cover anything. It was just like little stripes here and there on the female form. And I'd love to see my wife in that kind of outfit. I would not want anyone else to see her. And she'll never wear something like that for me. At least I don't think so. Not anymore, anyway. Okay, so those were the theoretical questions. I didn't even have to answer those, but I did. Or those were some of the theoretical questions he asked. And then his first official question of the week was titled, "Your Time is Up." And he said, he talked about cancellations, and he said, what title do you think should be canceled rather than will be canceled or whatever? Most recently, Batwoman, we know Batwoman is canceled, although it's still coming out, and that seemed like one that should. So I'm trying to think of another one that should be canceled that hasn't, in the future, we haven't already seen in solicits, has been canceled. And I feel awful saying it because I'm not reading it, but I feel like the Teen Titans or whatever they're called right now should be canceled. And really rethought and redone and given to some really good creators, just because of the past affection for that. But really the glory days of the Teen Titans or the new Teen Titans was so long ago. Maybe that's a bad choice. And then part of me wants to cancel The Walking Dead just because it's gone on so long. But the whole point of The Walking Dead is that it never gets canceled, right? That instead of the zombie movie that comes to an end, it's the zombie movie that never comes to an end. That was Robert Kirkman's brilliant idea. So what else would I like to see canceled? I don't know. Secretly, in my evil heart, I want to see Batgirl canceled. Not forever, but to be rebooted, but just because I am so bothered by that version of Batgirl. But anyway, so I'll move on from that. Regularity was the next title of the next question. It was clever. He put a lot of clever titles on, and after a while I stopped writing down the titles, I'm afraid. But one video was called Regularity, and he says, would you prefer, it's kind of arbitrary that comic books come out monthly, TV shows come out weekly, or soap operas come out daily. Would you prefer your comics to come out once a week or every month? Or would you prefer maybe 3 or 4 or 5 trades to come out and nothing else? And at one point I would have thought that I would prefer trades. I was a grown-up now, and that whole monthly thing was just based on an old model, and a grown-up wants graphic novels, and so let's see a series of graphic novels. But really I've completely come back to the weekly thing. And so presuming, that the quality could remain, and I could afford it, price was no object. If all the weekly series could be, say, as good as Future's End, I'd love weekly comics. Of course, the one good thing about monthly comics is I can buy, 50 monthly comics, let's say. But if they were weekly, I suppose I could only buy 12 weekly comics. Yeah, it would be a lot of fun to have a lot more weekly comics if they were really high quality. Then the next question was called architects. Do you think it's right that so small of a group of architects should be saying what's going on inside the Big Two's universe, like DC or Marvel, like with Jeff Johns and other people being the architects of the DC universe, and Brian Michael Bendis and Hickman and a few others being the architects of the Marvel universe? Or would you like someone new to come along? Or would you prefer they didn't have this whole idea of architects and thinking so far in advance? And I guess, when I first heard about the architects of the universes, I thought that was a really cool idea. But over time, I've come to really dislike it. And I would like a much more loosely planned universe. Because the other writers become slaves to those architects' plans to an extent. And it loses a lot of the comics lose their organic feel. If they do have to stick with this architect thing, I don't know. Would it help to constantly bring in new blood? It might. It feels like maybe, if Jeff Johns really is the architect of what's going on in DC anymore, whoever the architects are there, maybe it's time to roll over. I love a lot of Scott Snyder's writing, but I do not like the blowback on the other Bat titles, for instance. So mostly I'm just against the architect idea. Casting couch. If you could cast an actor or actress in a comic book role, who would it be? Who do you think they've gotten right in casting? I would like to see a young Robert Mitchum play the Spirit. And I would like to see the Spirit directed by Robert Altman. Beyond that, who did they get right? I thought the guy who played Cyclops in the X-Men movie was the perfect Cyclops. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what actors could play what things. I used to try to think about who could play Conan. The last guy to play Conan kind of had the right look, but it still wasn't too great of a movie. Partnering up. You're a big superhero, but you're getting tired. You have too many cases to deal with. It's time to get a sidekick. So yeah, I'm Christmas Man. So you have to pick a YouTuber to be your sidekick. Give him or her a superhero name and superhero powers. So I think, let's see. Oh, there's so many people I could pick. I will have Reader 1717 as my sidekick. And her name's going to be the Whiplash Kid. And her power is that she can whip out this whip of electric lightning at the bad guy. I don't know why. She's also an incredible acrobat. And she's much more merciless to the bad guys than I am. And the whole underworld becomes afraid of her and kind of laughs when Santa Man or Christmas Man comes along. And I just relax and go on TV interviews while she's beating up all the bad guys. Okay, death becomes them. What's your favorite death of a comic book hero? In a way, the death of Captain Marvel by Jim Starlin was really cool. He died of cancer, so it was a slow death, and he kind of got to say goodbye to everybody, and it was a pretty permanent death. I don't think we really had Marvel come back after that. So in a way, that's my favorite. You know, I guess you could say I was most affected by the death of Damien, but I didn't feel like that was a well done death by Grant Morrison. I felt like it was not impactful in the comic book where Damien died. It was very impactful in Tomasi and Gleason's Batman and Robin. Voices in my head. Ghostcritc talked about some people talking about the comic book characters' accents, like characters that have a thick French accent. When I immediately then go back to Patrick Lullipe. Um, Captain America, this shield of yours, it must go. Do you have voices in your head when you read comic book characters? Not necessarily accents, but do you hear a certain character's voice? And I feel I do, particularly for certain characters, but I don't know if I couldn't recreate them, but I do feel like in my head there are, once I know a character well for a while, there are voices. You know, like my Batman voice is not the Christian Slater kind of Batman voice. It's less crazy sounding and less gravelly. And there's a Conan voice in my head. There's a Reed Richards voice in my head and a Ben Grimm voice. So yeah, a lot of characters do have voices. I don't normally even think about that. I'd have to, next time I'm reading, I'm going to have to like examine more closely. What happens when I'm reading a book where I just don't know any of the characters? I feel like I still sort of start giving them voices from clues. You know, a good writer gives each character a little bit of a different speech pattern. Is there a new age of comics? Is there a new age of comics? Apparently, Clouded Journey suggested to Ghostcritc that this is indeed a new age of comics. And it does feel a bit that way. In a way, you need. It's weird to think you're in a new age of comics because normally you don't think about it. You don't know you're in a new age of comics. When I went through the 80s, that later they looked back on it and said, 1987 was when everything changed. I was there reading comics, but I didn't think about that then. And yet now I'm thinking. But I think we've seen maybe in a 5-year period the indies grow is seemingly in strength. Ghostcritc suggests they really aren't selling as much as people think, but they do seem to have a lot of buzz, and this pattern of creators becoming big at the big two and then going on to make even more money doing their own independent comics, I think is new, and so it is encouraging to think that's going to continue. And during every period of comics, I wasn't always focused and paying attention, but it feels like there's more really good comics right now because of this shift over to the creators because of Image. And so, yeah, it depends what you call an age of comics, but it does feel like we'll look back and this will be a particular age of comics, and it started maybe with The Walking Dead when it became popular, or it started with Saga maybe. Not that there weren't a lot of vibrant stuff before Saga, but it seems like after Saga there was kind of the little explosion became a big explosion of sort of creative excitement with Image at the center, but other exciting things going on elsewhere. Simply the best. What are the best story arcs for someone new to comics? And you can draw from your own favorite comics. So this, totally off the top of my head, if you're new to comics and you want to read some of Sleepy Reader's essential reading, I would say grab the trade of Sandman called Season of Mist. I would say read the original Galactus trilogy by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And I currently can't remember the issue numbers. It's in the high 50s or early 60s of the Fantastic Four from the 60s. And in fact, I would say go back and start the sort of a double arc in my mind of when the Fantastic Four meet the Inhumans and go to the hidden land of the Inhumans, and then come back and face Galactus. So that stretch of Fantastic Four, I'd say, do that. Maybe the again, I wish I knew the numbers. The Thor issues of the Jack Kirby Stan Lee run, where Magog almost destroys Asgard, and is about to draw the Odin sword and all of that. What else? I mean, yeah, it gets so hard to pick things, especially without some time and research. All-Star Superman, read that series if you were brand new to comics. Java runtime environment keeps bugging me. Okay. Simply the Best. Oh no, that's the one I just did. Crossing Over. What TV or movie would you like to see made into a comic book that hasn't already been made? So he's referring to the fact that for a long time in comics, there's been comics that adapt TV shows. And I've generally looked down on that as that I always thought of those as comic books made for the TV fan rather than comic books made for the comic book fan. But we've seen more and more exceptions to that, because in the old day, it seemed like they were more rote adaptations of the TV show, sticking very closely. And now, we've got the Godzilla series that IDW is doing, that at least the stuff I've read of it has some really strong work that transcends its origins. And I've never even really seen the show Adventure Time, but the comic book Adventure Time is killer. Why I haven't seen the show is a whole nother thing. So what hasn't been done in TV that I would enjoy seeing as a comic book? And man, that's hard to say. That's such a hard one for me. And I'm not watching much TV anymore. You know what would be really cool, done as an indie comic, continuing on in the lives of these characters, but not aping the show, not just doing the show as a souvenir for fans of the show, but a real continuation. Sex in the City. A comic book done Sex in the City, maybe done in kind of an indie style. Just because I can't think of anything else. My wife and I watched Sex in the City together, and I became a huge fan of that show. Favorite alternate version of a character from a comic book and worst alternate universe versions. Oh, man. I almost want to just take a pass on that question. Because I'm just drawing a blank on alternate. There's tons of alternate heroes, of course. In Earth 2, I really loved the new version of Lois Lane, the new 52 Earth 2, who was Red Tornado. In fact, that would be the biggest draw if I heard there was a lot of Red Tornado in the current weekly they're doing about Earth 2. I might be more tempted by that. So that was just a really cool alternate version. I think in the same book, I didn't really like their version of the Green Lantern. I don't quite know why. It just didn't click with me. Had nothing to do with him being gay, although maybe because he was gay, they didn't give him enough personality. I don't know. Because they didn't want to go. They were too afraid to muck around with the character. I don't know why I didn't like that character. But I think there's probably other alternate universe things. Whenever Marvel would do someone that was obviously a take on Superman, that always annoyed me. with the possible exception of Omega the Unknown, because he was a bit of a Superman take also. But what was the name of, not Supreme or Superior? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question. Okay, when Scott Bromstar was either having troubles or when he decided to leave YouTube, and, he's a great buddy of Ghostcritc and a great figure, or was a great figure in the YouTube community. If I should check and see if his channel's still there, because if you're newer to YouTube and you haven't seen him, you should check out Scott Bromstar. So for the sake of levity, Mark asked us to insert Scott Bromstar as a comic book character. And I know Scott loves his Jack Kirby stuff, and for some reason I just instantly flashed onto the old Jack Kirby Mr. Miracle, and in his entourage was on Earth when he was making a career as an escape artist, a performer. He had Big Barda, and then he had this dwarf midget named Oberon. And I'm picturing Scott, who I know is a big guy, shrunk down to be Oberon, a tiny little Scott, always worrying about Mr. Miracle and whether the latest super escape stunt would work out or not, and wearing that funny little skirt and little boots. So that's where I'm inserting Scott Bromstar. The next question was called Upcoming Attractions. What are you most looking forward to over the next month or two that you've heard solicited, or that recently you have wished you grabbed? Recently, I wished I grabbed Low. I wished I grabbed Low. I didn't grab it because the first issue was $3.99, and I just thought, well, I'll wait for the trades, $3.99. Even though I love Rick Remender, I can wait. But then after the first issue, they lowered the price to $3.50. And I keep hearing people talking about it, and I really wish I were reading it, and I wish I wasn't waiting for the trade. And if I'd been able to find the first two issues at my store, I probably would have gotten back onto it. But I think it's about to come out in trade now. And the other one is this one that's a Western on another planet, and I've just forgotten the name. But every time people talk about it, I wish I'd picked up on that. And of course, I will get it in trade. Coming up, there is there was an Image book that I was really excited about, and now I can't think of what it was. But, there's going to be a new Image book called Nameless by Grant Morrison. And the two current Grant Morrison books are really good, so I'm kind of excited to see what his next book at Image will be. Summer holiday with a book character. Who would it be? Comic book character. Who would it be, and where would you take them? I'd like to visit New Genesis, and maybe I'd take that Red Tornado robot Lois Lane with me. Yeah. Don't ask why. Unbelievable. Something in comics that's too beyond belief for you. I know this happens every once in a while. Often it's like some little detail, like with Batman getting sucked into a jet airplane engine, but then not getting sucked in all the way and managing to crawl out of it while flying up in the air. I remember that one at the end of Scott Snyder's Court of the Owls run. That in that final issue of that really bothered me. But I think that, the really big things like Galactus and the Negative Zone and Earth 2 and the Multiversity, I seem to manage to believe in all of that. I do think, like they mentioned in a recent Future's End, that Brainiac is really, like, the Brainiac we've seen is just a little tiny particle of the real Brainiac, who really exists in the entire multiverse and is out to destroy the whole thing. And I guess sometimes my believability meter gets too high on these characters that not only want to destroy the universe but want to destroy the multiverse. I mean, come on, it's just ridiculous. Um, yeah, so that might be where it goes. I will probably break off here. So yeah, come back later for part 2. Well, it'll be Sleepy Vlog 57.2, or is it 87? I gotta check my numbers. But I will see you again. If it's not before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. I think I'll probably get to another one before Christmas. But hope your preparations for Christmas, if you are a celebrator of Christmas, are going well. Or otherwise that your midwinter activities are going well. Talk to y'all later.